The sea was alive with fire. Engines screamed as they dived from the clouds, their frames trembling from speed, wings rattling under strain. American gunners lifted their heads to the sky and pulled triggers until barrels smoked. The smell of cordite and burning fuel drifted across the decks. One plane burst apart, another veered, but one kept coming. It slammed into the destroyer's hull, metal shrieked, flames rose. The paradox was impossible to ignore. For every pilot willing to die, a ship could be lost. Could America's vast armadas withstand thousands of such suicides? The concept of sacrifice in battle was not new to Japan. The code of Bushido, the warrior's way, demanded loyalty unto death. Yet by 1944, as the empire's grip collapsed, this ethos was transformed into strategy. Facing superior numbers of American ships and planes, Japanese planners sought weapons that required no retreat. If bombs and torpedoes could not halt the enemy, perhaps the pilot himself would serve as the warhead. Context made the decision clearer. By mid-1944, Japan had lost Saipan. From there, American B-29 bombers struck the home islands directly. The Philippine Sea had witnessed a slaughter of Japanese air power. Over 300 planes destroyed in what sailors called the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Factories struggled to replace losses. Pilots lacked training. Fuel reserves dwindled. Yet Japan still controlled islands critical to the defense of the homeland. To protect them, something radical was needed. The numbers were grim. American industry produced planes at a rate Japan could not fathom. In 1944 alone, the United States built more than 96,000 aircraft. Japan produced fewer than 30,000. The imbalance grew monthly. Naval construction showed the same gap. Where America launched Essex-class carriers by the dozen, Japan clung to a handful. Strategy meetings turned desperate. If one pilot could destroy one ship, perhaps sacrifice could offset production. It was in the Philippines that the idea became reality. On October 25, 1944, during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, Japanese planes dived deliberately into American ships. The term kamikaze, meaning divine wind, was resurrected from history, evoking the typhoons that had once destroyed Mongol invasion fleets. Now, it meant men turned into guided missiles. Eyewitnesses remembered vividly. Sailors described the scream of engines, the flash of sunlight on wings, the shock when impact sent fireballs into sky. Survivors smelled burning paint and oil, tasted salt mixed with ash. Commanders noted a new kind of terror, not planes that fought to live, but planes that sought death. One American sailor said they were not turning away. They came straight in, and nothing could stop them. U.S. National Archives, 1946. The first wave shocked America. At Leyte Gulf, kamikazes sank or damaged more than 30 ships. Destroyers, cruisers, even carriers were struck. Losses mounted quickly. Reports noted that single hits disabled warships more effectively than conventional bombs. The math seemed in Japan's favor. If a $20,000 aircraft with a volunteer pilot could cripple a $10 million carrier, could sacrifice equalize war. Yet the scale told another story. For every ship damaged, dozens of kamikazes were shot down. American radar picked up formations. Fighters intercepted. Anti-aircraft guns blazed. Smoke and noise filled decks as gunners fired until arms ached. The sea became a graveyard of wreckage, oil slicks stretching for miles. The price was staggering, but Japan's reserves of men willing to die seemed endless. The sensory experience for Americans was unlike anything before. On deck, men felt heat of explosions, tasted grit of shattered steel in mouths, heard screams mixed with gunfire. At night, they saw the glow of burning planes reflected on waves. Some sailors admitted fear not of death itself, but of relentlessness. They kept coming. Even when we shot 5 down, a 6th would hit. Red Cross Report, 1945. Japan expanded the program rapidly. Entire units were reorganized into Special Attack Corps. Young men, many still students, were recruited, trained quickly, and told their mission was honor through death. Farewell letters filled with poetry and patriotism survived in archives. Some believed deeply in sacrifice. Others obeyed silently. Compelled by pressure and propaganda, numbers swelled. Between late 1944 and 1945, Japan launched more than 9,000 kamikaze sorties. At Okinawa alone, over 1,500 planes dived at fleets. The scale was unprecedented in history, yet even as numbers grew, the underlying imbalance remained. America produced ships faster than Japan could destroy them. Factories in the United States rolled out Liberty ships in weeks, carriers in months, destroyers in swarms. Every strike that sank one vessel was answered by replacements already under construction. A paradox sharpened. The more Japan sacrificed, the more America built. The ethical capsule begins here. Was it weapon or desperation? At the time, Japanese leaders called kamikazes a strategic choice. Allied observers called it tragedy and waste. Historians today debate. Geneva addressed prisoners but not pilots who volunteered for death. Was it courage, coercion, or exploitation? The question lingers. The first great test came in early 1945 at Luzon. American fleets crowded Philippine waters. Kamikazes struck daily. Destroyers picked up radar echoes. Gunners fired until decks smoked. Yet hits landed. The escort carrier USS Omni Bay was sunk, dozens of sailors lost. Other carriers limped from damage. Reports chilled commanders. No tactic seemed to prevent at least some planes from breaking through. The sensory toll deepened. Survivors described flames racing across decks, water boiling as fuel spilled and burned. Men dove into sea, swallowing oil. Others clung to rafts as wreckage sank. The sight of bodies floating, the sound of ships groaning before slipping under, imprinted itself on memory. For many, the smell of burning flesh haunted long after. American commanders adapted. Radar picket destroyers spread wide nets, detecting attackers early. Combat air patrols circled carriers, intercepting as many as possible. Black corridors of anti-aircraft fire blazed like walls of steel. Tactics improved, but the cost remained high. Kamikazes still struck, still exploded, still killed. By the time of Iwo Jima, the pattern was entrenched. Japan's air force could no longer win dogfights, but kamikazes kept pressure constant. They targeted transports, landing craft, any vessel vulnerable. Marines hitting beaches looked up and saw suicide planes diving, smoke trails behind them. One Marine recalled, "We fought on land, but the sea never stopped burning." U.S. National Archives, 1946. The paradox sharpened with every battle. Japan poured lives into skies, yet America answered with machines. Numbers alone told the truth. For 9,000 kamikaze sorties, fewer than 400 ships were sunk or badly damaged. America built far more in the same time. Sacrifice could kill, but it could not stop. Still, for those in the moment, the terror was real. Sailors described nights when sleep was impossible, the distant hum of engines in dreams, sudden alarms wrenching them awake. Gunners lived on coffee and adrenaline, eyes bloodshot from watching skies. Commanders noted fatigue spreading across fleets, men strained by constant expectation of death from above. The Japanese perspective carried equal weight. Pilots prepared with rituals, writing letters, drinking sake, some shaving heads before flights. Ground crews saluted as planes launched, knowing they would not return. One diary entry read, "I do this for my family, for my country. Forgive me for leaving." Red Cross Report, 1945. Whether coerced or convinced, they flew into death with no illusions. The sensory imagery crossed cultures. Japanese witnesses described the silence before dawn flights, the chill of cockpits, the smell of fuel heavy in air. For them, the last sensation was often the jolt of impact, though few lived to tell. For Americans, the sensation was opposite: the heat of fire, the shock of explosions, the sight of comrades lost. By early 1945, both sides understood the stakes. Japan sought to break morale through terror and attrition. America sought to endure through production and adaptation. The collision of these approaches defined the last year of Pacific War. The stage was set for the ultimate confrontation, Okinawa, where thousands of kamikazes hurled themselves at fleets, and the question was settled. The American response hardened with every attack. Carriers deployed thicker screens of destroyers, radar pickets moved farther out, and night fighters patrolled skies continuously. The P-61 Black Widow and F-6F Hellcats stalked suicide planes before they reached formations. Still, the kamikazes adapted, flying low over waves, hiding in cloud banks, attacking in swarms that overwhelmed defenses. In February 1945, during operations around Manila, fleets endured waves of suicide strikes. Radar picked up 20 blips at once. Fighters intercepted half. Flak tore down several more, but 6 broke through. 1 slammed into the cruiser USS Columbia, setting decks ablaze. Sailors battled fire for hours, dragging wounded to safety, pumping water into hulls to keep ship afloat. Commanders realized no defense was perfect. Probability meant some would always slip past. The mathematics of war became undeniable. American production dwarfed Japanese sacrifice. Shipyards at Mare Island and Brooklyn worked day and night, welding steel, launching destroyers in weeks, carriers in months. Even as kamikazes struck, replacements already steamed west across Pacific. By contrast, Japan's industrial base collapsed. Bombing raids destroyed factories. Fuel imports shrank to a trickle. The empire could not replace planes lost to suicide. Each sacrifice bled resources unrecoverable. Yet propaganda inside Japan painted kamikazes as divine. Posters showed cherry blossoms falling, equating death with beauty. Speeches promised one pilot could sink one ship. That devotion outweighed numbers. Families sent sons off with pride and tears. Some volunteers believed sincerely, others quietly despaired. Letters reveal the divide. One read, "I fly tomorrow. My body is nothing, but my spirit belongs to Japan." Another confessed, "I wish only to live, but I cannot refuse." Red Cross Report, 1945. For Americans, understanding the psychology proved difficult. Commanders called it fanaticism. Soldiers on decks called it insanity. Yet historians note the complexity. Not all were volunteers, many were pressured, and most were too young to resist authority. The ethical capsule grows sharper here. Courage, coercion, patriotism, and manipulation intertwined. Geneva said nothing of men sent to die deliberately. Was it strategy or mass exploitation? Debate continues. The sensory memory of battles haunted both sides. Americans remembered the heat of steel burning under their boots, the choking smoke that blinded and suffocated, the cries of wounded echoing across compartments. Survivors described the metallic taste of fear mixed with salt spray as hoses fought fire. For Japanese crews on islands, memories were quieter. The silence of dawn, the sight of rows of planes prepared for one-way missions, the smell of fuel and incense mingling. Ground crews watched takeoffs with solemnity, then emptiness. Statistics give cold clarity. At Luzon and Leyte, kamikazes sank or crippled dozens of ships, but at cost of hundreds of planes. By March 1945, over 1,000 pilots had died in suicide missions. Yet America's fleets grew larger, not smaller. Admiral Nimitz reported, "Their sacrifice is terrible, but it cannot alter outcome." U.S. National Archives, 1946. The imbalance was permanent. The paradox hardened. Each kamikaze aimed to destroy, but collectively they revealed Japan's weakness. Where America deployed resources, Japan deployed flesh. Where America built with steel, Japan spent lives. The arithmetic favored the industrial giant. For every life lost, a ship might fall, but more ships waited. For every 100 men gone, factories in America built replacements measured in thousands. On the ground, Marines witnessed results directly. At Iwo Jima, kamikazes targeted landing craft and supply vessels. Explosions offshore lit beaches in orange glow. Marines dug in, fighting Japanese defenders, while above them, planes dived into transports. One recalled, "We fought enemy in front, but his shadow from sky never left." The combination of land resistance and suicide strikes aimed to break morale. Instead, it steeled resolve. Soldiers swore vengeance for ships lost, comrades killed, fleets scarred. By April, all eyes turned toward Okinawa. Both sides knew it would be decisive. For Japan, it was last chance to defend homeland. For America, it was stepping stone to invasion. The Kamikaze Corps prepared thousands of planes. Volunteers gathered, wrote farewell letters, trained in brief exercises before being sent to die. On islands across Ryukyus, airstrips filled with aircraft stripped of armor, loaded with bombs, barely maintained, yet lethal in purpose. American planners braced for impact. Radar picket lines stretched wide. Carriers prepared constant fighter patrols. Destroyers stacked ammunition for endless barrages. Marines landing on Okinawa's beaches knew skies would burn. Commanders briefed men. The storm would be unprecedented. In this crucible, the paradox sharpened once more. Could thousands of lives hurled against fleets shift balance? Or would America's machines absorb sacrifice? Both sides prepared to test answer with blood and steel. The buildup itself carried sensory weight. American sailors remembered nervous energy, smell of oil thick in air, taste of rations hurriedly swallowed before battle. Japanese pilots remembered calm silence of last nights, incense smoke in barracks, final sake shared with comrades. The stage was set for the largest suicide assault in history. Even before Okinawa began, raids increased. In late March 1945, kamikazes struck Task Force 58 as it bombarded islands. Over 50 planes dived in one day. Anti-aircraft guns roared, fighters clawed skies, yet some broke through. The carrier, USS Franklin, was crippled, nearly sunk by explosions. Hundreds died. Flames towered. Smoke choked survivors. Franklin limped home, a testament to resilience, but also proof kamikazes could wound giants. Still, the industrial weight remained. As Franklin sailed away, other carriers filled her place. Shipyards already launched replacements. The cycle repeated: attack, damage, repair, replace. Japan could not match it. Every pilot lost was gone forever. By April 1st, when Marines stormed Okinawa's beaches, the kamikaze storm began. Over following weeks, waves of suicide planes hurled themselves at fleets. Some struck true, some failed, many died before reaching targets. The ocean itself seemed to writhe with fire, explosions marking every horizon. For sailors, it was nightmare of relentlessness. For Japanese pilots, it was destiny embraced. This was war reduced to its essence: sacrifice against production, life against industry, devotion against machines. The paradox that defined the final year of Pacific War unfolded in full. The first week of April 1945 set the tone for everything that followed. The seas around Okinawa seethed with American ships, more than 1,300 vessels of every class, from mighty carriers to fragile landing craft. Never before had such an armada assembled in the Pacific. Against it, Japan hurled desperation itself. Kamikaze formations rose from Kyushu, Formosa, and hidden strips, their wings heavy with bombs, their pilots resigned to death. On April 6th, the first great mass attack began. More than 350 aircraft launched in waves. American radar screens filled with echoes. Fighters scrambled. Gunners manned stations. Destroyers on the radar picket line braced. Engines roared overhead. Tracers arced skyward. Smoke filled horizons. Dozens of planes fell before reaching targets, but dozens more pressed on. One smashed into the battleship Maryland, ripping holes in her decks. Another plowed into the destroyer Bush, splitting her hull. By nightfall, Bush had sunk, hundreds of sailors lost. The numbers shocked commanders. In a single day, 10 ships were sunk or crippled. Damage reports filled pages, casualties in the thousands. Yet when dawn came, fleets remained. Carriers launched strikes, Marines advanced ashore. Logistics continued. Sacrifice hurt, but it did not halt. For sailors, the sensory experience was overwhelming. The roar of engines at mast height, the rattle of 50-caliber machine guns, the blinding flash of impacts. Every sense was assaulted. Men described the heat of fires searing skin, the taste of smoke clogging throats, the vibration of decks as ships shuddered under blows. Some gunners fired until hands blistered, sweat stinging eyes fixed on sky streaked with falling wreckage. Japanese pilots prepared differently. Diaries tell of calm resolve, of sake shared before flight, of poems left on bunks. One wrote, "Cherry blossoms fall at their peak. I fall tomorrow." Another admitted doubt. "I do not want to die, but my friends expect me." I cannot bring shame. Red Cross Report, 1945. On runways, engines roared, ground crews saluted, and then silence fell as planes dwindled into horizon. The scale only grew. On April 12th, another mass attack came. More than 250 planes swept in. This time, carriers bore brunt. USS Enterprise took a hit, fires raging across decks. USS Essex fought off attackers with walls of fire, but lost dozens of men. Radar picket destroyers endured worst, isolated on edges of fleet. The USS Manert El Abeli was struck by 2 kamikazes in rapid succession and sank in minutes. Survivors clung to debris, oil burning around them, smoke choking lungs. For sailors on other ships, watching comrades vanish into sea was trauma that lingered. The paradox repeated. Each wave inflicted pain, but fleets endured. America's industrial might meant no loss was irreplaceable. Destroyers were built in weeks, carriers in months. Factories in California, Virginia, and New York turned steel into warships faster than Japan could train pilots. Kamikazes bled Japan faster than they bled America. By late April, patterns emerged. Kamikazes attacked in Kikusui waves, coordinated mass strikes meant to overwhelm defenses. 10 such waves struck between April and June. More than 500 aircraft were expended. Losses for Japan were staggering. Few returned. Entire squadrons vanished. Yet still they came. Each wave meant new letters, new farewells, new empty seats at family tables. For Americans, fatigue deepened. Crews slept in short bursts, always ready for alarms. The hum of engines haunted dreams. Some sailors developed what doctors called battle fatigue, trembling at sounds of aircraft even when none approached. Commanders rotated men, but the strain spread across fleets. Admiral Spruance noted, "The enemy fights with courage, but we have steel and stamina." U.S. National Archives, 1946. The sensory environment of Okinawa was constant chaos. Gunfire echoed day and night. Smoke clung to ships, staining uniforms. Oil slicks spread across sea, rainbow films reflecting sun. The smell of death mixed with salt and fuel. Survivors remembered the taste of metal in mouths, the feel of decks vibrating under impacts, the sound of wounded crying in sick bays already full. Japanese accounts, where they survived, revealed equal intensity. One pilot who failed to find target wrote in diary before death, "I feel shame. My comrades succeeded. I must try again." Others described peace before flight, the quiet of cherry blossoms, the taste of rice and tea, the feel of wind in hair on final takeoff. Their humanity made sacrifice more poignant. By May, Okinawa's battle reached climax. Kamikaze numbers peaked. On May 4th, nearly 400 aircraft launched. Dozens pierced defenses. Destroyers Evans and Hugh W. Hadley fought alone against swarms, downing dozens before being crippled. Sailors described guns overheating, barrels glowing red, hands burned from heat. Still, planes kept coming. Impact after impact tore ships apart. Survivors dove into sea, clinging to wreckage, waves stained with oil and blood. The numbers told brutal truth. By end of May, more than 30 American ships had been sunk, over 350 damaged, thousands killed or wounded. Yet fleets pressed on. Marines advanced inland, capturing Okinawa piece by piece. Airfields fell to Allied hands, cutting Japan's reach further. Kamikazes inflicted pain but could not alter strategy. The ethical capsule sharpened here. Japan's leaders justified sacrifice as defense of homeland. American commanders called it futile slaughter. Historians debate still. Was it devotion or coercion of youth? Geneva offered no guidance for deliberate suicide tactics. The moral weight fell on memory, unresolved yet undeniable. By June, the storm faded. Japan's air reserves were exhausted. Thousands of young men had died, hundreds of planes lost, yet America's fleets stood. Okinawa was secured. The road to Japan lay open. The paradox had been proven in blood. 9,000 lives hurled into sea could wound, but not stop an industrial titan. For survivors, memory endured. Americans carried scars of fire, nightmares of engines diving, guilt of comrades lost. Japanese families carried grief of sons who never returned, letters that ended mid-sentence, dreams that ended in smoke. Together, they bore the cost of a strategy born of desperation. The pressure on American fleets never relented during Okinawa. Every dawn brought new alarms. Radar operators watched screens fill with echoes. Each blip, a man resolved to die. Fighters scrambled endlessly. Gunners rotated through shifts. Ammunition crews hauled shells until muscles failed. The ocean thundered with constant fire. Sailors later said they measured days not by hours but by attacks. Morning wave, afternoon wave, night raid. Sleep came only in fragments. Casualties mounted. Medical teams worked beyond exhaustion, bandaging burns, amputating limbs, pumping seawater from lungs of men pulled from wreckage. The smell of iodine mixed with smoke in sick bays. Chaplains read prayers over rows of covered bodies, waves lapping gently against hulls. Yet carriers still launched sorties. Marines still pressed inland. The machinery of war turned despite wounds. For Japan, Okinawa drained the last of its strength. More than 1,500 kamikazes were launched in Kikusui waves. Few returned. Airfields emptied. Fuel reserves collapsed. Students barely out of school sat in cockpits. Mechanics patched old planes, stripping parts from wrecks. Some aircraft barely flew, yet still launched into destiny. Letters recovered after war show mixture of pride and despair. One wrote, "I become a shield for my family." Another, "Forgive me, I wished for a life." Red Cross report, 1945. The paradox remained unbroken. Sacrifice inflicted wounds but did not alter trajectory. America's fleets absorbed punishment, industry filled gaps. In shipyards back home, keels were laid. Welders worked sparks into night. Hulls slid into rivers. Every ship sunk was already replaced in steel. Japan could not replace lives lost. The sensory contrast deepened. Survivors of kamikaze hits spoke of deafening blasts, decks buckling under feet, heat so intense paint blistered from bulkheads. Others recalled silence after impact, broken only by cries of wounded and hiss of fire hoses. For Japanese ground crews, the memory was different. The echo of engines fading into distance, the emptiness of runways, the sight of empty bunks. Both sides carried scars unseen. Strategically, Okinawa sealed Japan's fate. The island fell, providing airfields for B-29s and staging ground for invasion. Kamikazes had not stopped the advance. They had not turned back fleets. They had inflicted losses. Nearly 5,000 American sailors killed, more than 30 ships sunk, hundreds damaged, but they had not changed outcome. The imbalance of industry versus sacrifice was absolute. Admiral Spruance summarized bluntly, "They hurt us, but they cannot stop us." U.S. National Archives, 1946. His words captured essence of Okinawa. The storm of suicide had bloodied the fleet, but left the war machine intact. The ethical reflection sharpened further. Historians ask whether Japanese leaders believed sacrifice could work, or whether it was a gesture of pride in defeat. At the time, many American commanders called it murder of youth. Some Japanese officers saw it differently, as ultimate devotion. The debate endures. Was it courage, coercion, or cruelty? By end of June, seas around Okinawa calmed. Smoke cleared, wreckage sank, fleets remained. For sailors, silence felt unnatural. Some expected engines to dive again at any moment. Others wept openly, release after months of fear. Marines ashore looked upward at empty skies, knowing thousands had died to darken them. The numbers confirmed futility. Nearly 9,000 kamikazes launched in final year of war. Fewer than 400 ships were sunk or seriously damaged. America produced more than 1,000 warships in same span. The arithmetic was unanswerable. Sacrifice could not match factories. Still, for individuals, the cost was absolute. A sailor burned on deck felt loss, no numbers erased. A Japanese mother receiving last letter bore grief beyond statistics. The sensory legacy remained in human hearts. The heat of fire, the sound of engines, the silence of absence. As July dawned, Japan stood broken. Airfields lay in ruins, fleets shattered, youth expended. Yet leaders still prepared for final defense. Kamikaze was not abandoned. Plans called for thousands more, including rocket planes and human-guided bombs. but the Empire lacked means to carry them out. The tide was irreversible. For America, Okinawa was both victory and warning. The battle had cost thousands of lives, dozens of ships. If sacrifice on this scale meant invasion of home islands, losses might multiply. Planners considered alternatives. The weight of kamikaze attacks influenced decisions yet to come. The paradox closed its second act. Japan had hurled lives like arrows. America had answered with steel. The clash proved which force endured. Yet cost lingered in memory, numbers etched in history, faces remembered in silence. By July 1945, the ocean carried silence that felt deceptive. Kamikaze raids had grown sporadic as Japan's air strength dwindled, yet American commanders braced for more. Intelligence estimated thousands of planes still hidden on home islands, waiting for the inevitable invasion. If Okinawa had cost so much, what would Japan itself demand? The answer lay in arithmetic that no courage could overturn. Between October 1944 and June 1945, nearly 9,000 kamikaze sorties were launched. They sank 34 American ships and damaged more than 350. Nearly 5,000 sailors were killed, thousands more wounded. But in the same months, American shipyards produced more than 1,000 vessels. Factories turned out planes by the tens of thousands. For every destroyer lost, 3 more slid into water. For every plane destroyed, dozens replaced it. The equation was merciless. Japanese planners understood the imbalance, but hoped desperation might sway. Operation Ketsu-Go envisioned throwing thousands of suicide planes, boats, and even human torpedoes against invasion fleets. The goal was not victory, but cost so high America might reconsider. Yet industry cannot be intimidated by sacrifice alone. America's capacity dwarfed any losses kamikazes could inflict. The sensory toll endured on both sides. American sailors still flinched at drone of engines. Nightmares carried sound of planes diving, smell of burning oil, heat of fire-licking skin. Japanese families still lit incense for sons gone, red letters smudged with tears. The human weight of a strategy measured in lives was inescapable. Eyewitness reports grew darker. Survivors of USS Bunker Hill described 2 kamikazes slamming into carrier within minutes, detonating bombs, killing nearly 400 men. Flames towered 1,000 feet into sky. One sailor said, "The air itself burned." U.S. National Archives, 1946. Yet even as Bunker Hill limped home, other carriers filled her place. The fleet remained, mission unbroken. The ethical capsule sharpened further. In Tokyo, leaders justified sacrifice as ultimate weapon. To them, dying for emperor was highest honor. Allied observers called it exploitation of youth. Historians argue still. Was it devotion or manipulation? Geneva rules had no article for pilots ordered to die. The boundary between courage and coercion blurred. Meanwhile, American industry reached heights unseen. Shipyards on both coasts hammered steel day and night. Liberty ships slid down ways in weeks. Essex-class carriers launched monthly. Factories turned out planes so quickly that units overseas scrapped older models rather than ship them home. The war economy operated at scale Japan could not imagine. Against this tide, kamikaze became symbol of tragedy, not strategy. For sailors on deck, the math was abstract, but the danger immediate. They saw comrades burned, ships shattered, sea littered with oil and wreckage. Each attack was personal, not statistical. One recalled, "You didn't think of production back home. You thought of fire in front of you." Red Cross Report, 1945. The paradox was that individual terror never changed collective outcome. The sensory imagery of Okinawa remained etched. Survivors spoke of ships coated in soot, hands raw from hauling hoses, lungs filled with smoke. Others recalled eerie silence between raids, horizon calm, then sudden roar of engines. Japanese accounts mirror it. The chill of cockpits at dawn, the weight of silence before takeoff, the taste of rice balls eaten as last meal. These details survive beyond numbers. By August, Japan's reserves were shattered. Airfields empty, fuel scarce, pilots gone. Kamikazes had cost nearly 10,000 lives for results America's factories absorbed. The nation that built 96,000 planes in a year could not be stopped by sacrifice. The paradox resolved itself. Courage alone cannot equal industry. Yet even in defeat, memory of kamikazes endured. American sailors never forgot terror of planes that refused to turn away. Japanese families never forgot sons who never returned. For both, the strategy left scars that statistics could not heal. The fleets off Okinawa bore scars like none before. Destroyers were patched with steel plates, carriers sailed with burned decks, sailors carried bandages beneath uniforms. Yet operations pressed forward. Marines advanced inland, securing airfields mile by mile. Kamikaze waves, once terrifying storms, dwindled to scattered strikes. The silence that followed was almost more haunting than chaos. Men expected engines to return, yet skies remained empty. Japanese leadership faced the collapse with denial and defiance. In July, directives ordered preparations for 100 million deaths if invasion came. Kamikaze units were expanded on paper, with thousands of planes assigned. But fuel was scarce, pilots untrained, and factories bombed. Many aircraft never left ground. The plan was illusion sustained by desperation. American commanders read reports and calculated. If Okinawa had cost 5,000 sailors, how many would invasion of Japan itself claim? Estimates ran into hundreds of thousands. Kamikazes were not changing outcome, but they multiplied cost. Their shadow influenced every strategic decision in Washington. The ethical debate reached climax. Some saw kamikazes as symbols of ultimate courage, others as evidence of leadership's cruelty. A captured Japanese officer admitted under interrogation, "We had no other weapon. Our boys were all we had left." U.S. National Archives, 1946. His words encapsulated paradox. Bravery harnessed as substitute for resources. For survivors, memory clung to senses. A gunner on USS Hadley recalled burning his hands on overheated barrels, skin blistered, yet still firing. A sailor on USS Laffey remembered taste of blood from biting tongue as ship shuddered under impact. A Japanese pilot's farewell letter described scent of pine trees on airfield before takeoff, last breath of home before death. Across ocean, memories aligned in sensory fragments, each side human, each side scarred. Strategically, the verdict was final. Between late 1944 and summer 1945, kamikazes had sunk 34 ships, damaged more than 350, killed thousands. But America's war machine never slowed. Instead, it expanded. Carriers struck homeland, B-29s burned cities, submarines strangled supply lines. Sacrifice bought delay, not salvation. The paradox crystallized in one comparison. In April 1945 alone, more than 1,500 kamikazes were expended at Okinawa. In same month, American shipyards launched 45 destroyers, 5 carriers, and dozens of auxiliary ships. Factories produced more than 7,000 aircraft. No amount of death could balance steel of that magnitude. By war's end, nearly 9,000 kamikaze sorties had been attempted. Fewer than 400 ships sunk or seriously damaged. America had more vessels afloat in August than in October when campaign began. The arithmetic was absolute. Yet in human terms, numbers concealed pain. Each ship struck meant families mourning, letters sent home, comrades buried at sea. Each pilot lost meant empty seat at dinner table, shrine tended for decades. Sacrifice did not shift outcome, but it scarred generations. The sensory legacy endured longest. American veterans described nightmares of engines diving, sudden explosions, screams in dark. Japanese families remembered quiet moments of farewell, letters stained with tears, photographs of sons in uniform. History records statistics, but memory holds sensations. When the bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and Japan surrendered, kamikazes ceased. The program ended not by choice, but by collapse. The paradox was complete. 9,000 sacrifices could not halt a nation of machines. America outbuilt death itself. The American war machine was not measured in courage, but in steel, oil, and numbers. While kamikazes plunged into ships with fire and devotion, across the ocean welders bent over steel plates, riveters hammered decks into place, and cranes lifted engines into new hulls. The contrast could not be sharper. For every destroyer struck down at Okinawa, 3 more were already sliding into water at shipyards in California and Maine. Factories in Detroit that once made cars now built tanks and bombers. Ford's Willow Run plant produced 1 B-24 bomber every hour at its peak. Boeing rolled B-29s onto tarmacs in streams. The Essex-class carriers came so fast that admirals sometimes lacked enough crews to man them. America's gross national product by 1944 had more than doubled compared to 1940. Japan's shrank every year under blockade and bombardment. The balance of war was not courage against fear, but capacity against exhaustion. Sailors at the front felt this industrial tide in subtle ways. Ammunition never ran out. Spare parts arrived weekly. Damaged ships steamed to Leyte or Pearl Harbor were patched and returned to action in weeks. The destroyer Laffey, hit by multiple kamikazes, limped away smoking, but was back in service after repairs. A sailor wrote, "We took blows, but they fixed us like we were machines, and then we went back." U.S. National Archives, 1946. The sensory imagery of this system was striking. In American yards, the clang of steel echoed day and night. Sparks showered from welders. The air smelled of hot iron. Workers tasted sweat and grease, felt vibration of machinery under their boots. On the other side of the ocean, Japanese factories stood in ruins, machines silent, oil scarce, young men gone to war. Logistics magnified the imbalance. America controlled Pacific sea lanes. Convoys of tankers and freighters poured supplies forward. Okinawa consumed shells by the millions. They arrived without pause. Japan's convoys, by contrast, were shattered by submarines. By 1945, more than 80% of Japan's merchant fleet had been sunk. Fuel shortages crippled training. Pilots often flew suicide missions with less than 10 hours of flight experience. The sacrifice was not equal. It was forced by starvation of resources. Eyewitness accounts emphasized the futility. An American officer recalled, "We saw boys flying into us who could barely control their planes. Their courage was real, but their skill was gone." Red Cross Report, 1945. Japanese diaries confirm, "I practiced only once before my mission. I do not know if I will even reach target." The gap between industrial preparation and human desperation widened. The ethical capsule sharpened. Geneva never considered suicide weapons. Was America's overwhelming production humane by shortening war, or inhumane by making resistance impossible? Historians argue that industrial war erased balance of courage and placed survival in factories. For Japan, asking sacrifice of boys was only path left. For America, building ships faster than they could be sunk became strategy itself. The paradox was visible in simple statistics. In April 1945, kamikazes destroyed 34 ships. That same month, U.S. yards launched more than 40 destroyers, 5 carriers, and hundreds of smaller craft. In a single month, production erased destruction. Courage could not match capacity. For sailors, numbers were invisible but results tangible. Even after devastating attacks, replacements arrived. Carriers rotated, supplies never failed, fleets stayed strong. One gunner remembered, "We thought we might run out of ships, but more kept coming. It felt like America was endless." U.S. National Archives, 1946. Japanese survivors saw opposite. One wrote, "We poured lives into ocean. Still their ships multiplied. It was like fighting the sea itself." The sensory contrast of logistics was profound. Americans smelled fresh paint on new hulls, heard whistles of launching ceremonies, tasted food shipped in endless convoys. Japanese civilians smelled smoke of burned factories, heard silence of empty workshops, tasted hunger. War at industrial scale left no illusions. By mid-1945, America's fleets numbered more than 100 carriers, thousands of escort ships, tens of thousands of aircraft. Japan's remaining kamikazes numbered in thousands, but lacked fuel and pilots. The balance was no longer contest, but inevitability. Admirals knew it. Commanders knew it. Pilots on both sides felt it. The paradox repeated in every battle. Kamikazes struck, ships burned, sailors died. Yet fleets sailed on, replacements arrived, industry erased losses. Sacrifice inflicted wounds, but could not kill the machine. America had built a war system that no number of suicides could exhaust. Industrial America reached its zenith as kamikazes reached their limit. By July 1945, shipyards had launched more than 1,200 major vessels in a single year. Aircraft production topped 96,000. Tankers carried oil by millions of barrels. Steel output exceeded that of the entire Axis combined. The war machine functioned like an engine too massive to halt. Against this tide, 9,000 suicides became tragic sparks against a flood. For American crews, the sensory life of logistics was strange comfort. Supply ships arrived daily, unloading crates of shells, barrels of gasoline, even ice cream machines for carriers. Sailors tasted luxury even in war, cold treats under hot Pacific sun. In contrast, Japanese pilots drank last cups of sake before climbing into cockpits stripped of armor, their mouths dry with fear and determination. The gulf between abundance and scarcity was as wide as ocean itself. The mathematics of attrition became irrefutable. Kamikazes sank 34 American ships during entire campaign. In the same span, American shipyards produced dozens more of same classes. Even when destroyers like Laffey and Evans were crippled, replacements already steamed west. When Bunker Hill burned, Essex and Enterprise carried on. Losses that would cripple any other fleet became temporary setbacks. Admiral Nimitz explained it bluntly. Our strength lies in replacement. We can afford loss, they cannot. U.S. National Archives, 1946. His words cut to paradox. Japan invested lives it could not spare. America invested steel it had in endless supply. The ethical reflection grew heavier. Was it nobler to sacrifice lives or to drown enemy in production? Japanese propaganda claimed honor lay in self-destruction. American doctrine claimed honor lay in victory through endurance. Historians today debate which side bore heavier moral weight. Geneva rules addressed prisoners and civilians, but not boys, ordered to die in one-way flights. The war expanded definitions of courage and cruelty alike. For sailors who endured, the sensory memory never faded. Men remembered heat of fires, screams of wounded, smell of burning oil-coating waves. Others recalled endless sound of hammers in shipyards when they returned. Steel striking steel, promise that fleets would never end. Japanese civilians carried opposite memory, silence of bombed factories, taste of hunger, empty homes where sons never returned. By August, kamikazes dwindled to handfuls. Fuel gone, pilots gone, planes gone, yet America's fleets were larger than ever. Dozens of new carriers, hundreds of destroyers, thousands of planes stood ready for invasion. The contrast was crushing. Sacrifice had consumed Japan's youth, yet America's machines rolled forward untouched. Strategically, the lesson was clear. No amount of human devotion could equal resources of industrial giant. Kamikazes showed bravery but exposed futility. For every man who died diving into steel, more steel sailed across ocean. The paradox had one conclusion. When atomic bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and Japan surrendered, kamikaze program ended instantly. Plans for thousands more suicide planes, boats, and rockets dissolved. Lives that might have been sacrificed were spared by collapse. The irony was sharp. Weapons of machines, not men, ended war. In memory, kamikazes remain a symbol of tragedy. Their courage cannot be denied, but their effect cannot be exaggerated. They wounded, they scarred, but they could not stop America. The war proved that in industrial age, factories outweighed devotion. When the guns fell silent in August 1945, Japan lay in ruins. Cities were ash piles, industry shattered, families grieving. Nearly 9,000 kamikaze sorties had been flown, thousands of young men gone, yet the empire still surrendered. The paradox had resolved itself. Courage expended, machines triumphant. America outbuilt sacrifice, outproduced devotion, outlasted desperation. For American sailors, surrender brought relief, but not release. Many carried scars invisible. They dreamed of engines diving, woke to phantom alarms, flinched at sounds of planes overhead. Letters home spoke of victory, but memories carried weight of comrades lost to fire and sea. One veteran wrote, "We won, but at night I still hear them coming." U.S. National Archives, 1946. For Japanese families, surrender meant silence where voices had once been. Mothers tended shrines, fathers wept in private, brothers and sisters grew up with empty chairs at tables. Farewell letters were treasured, photographs placed before incense. Some believed sacrifice had meaning, others called it theft of futures. Diaries speak of bitterness. We gave our sons, and still we lost. The ethical capsule stands sharpest here. At the time, Japan's leaders declared kamikaze noble, the highest devotion. America declared it futile slaughter. Historians now weigh it differently. Some call it ultimate proof of patriotism. Others see mass coercion. Geneva offered no words for suicide as weapon. Was it courage or cruelty, faith or manipulation? Debate continues, and perhaps no answer can satisfy. The numbers remain stark. 9,000 sorties, 34 ships sunk, 350 damaged, nearly 5,000 American sailors dead, 10 times as many Japanese pilots gone. The equation is unyielding. Lives against machines, sacrifice against industry, devotion against capacity. The outcome did not change. Yet within futility lay legacy. Kamikazes forced America to rethink defense. Radar picket destroyers became vital, fighter patrols constant, anti-aircraft fire refined. Tactics born of desperation reshaped fleets. In Cold War years that followed, navies planned always for missiles, for suicide-like speed, for sudden attack. The lessons of 1945 echoed into jet age. The sensory legacy also endured. Veterans remembered smell of burning oil, taste of salt mixed with smoke, heat of fires licking skin. Japanese families remembered incense of farewells, silence of empty bunks, touch of paper letters folded too many times. These memories outlasted steel and statistics. They passed into generations, reminders of cost beyond numbers. The paradox itself became cautionary tale. Nations cannot substitute devotion for resources indefinitely. Sacrifice can inspire, can wound, but cannot outweigh industry. Japan proved this truth with lives of its youth. America proved it with might of its factories. The result was not just victory, but a shift in how war would be fought thereafter. Admiral Halsey once said, "No weapon frightens me more than a man who wants to die, but no war is won by death alone." U.S. National Archives, 1946. His words frame the legacy. Kamikazes frightened, scarred, killed, but they did not win. When peace returned, survivors carried fragments. American sailors built families, lived decades, but flinched at sudden noises. Japanese parents mourned quietly, told stories of sons with pride and sorrow. Both bore weight of a strategy that had no victory in it. The final lesson is both brutal and simple. 9,000 lives poured into ocean could not break fleets built by factories. Sacrifice alone cannot defeat machines. In industrial age, courage without capacity is tragedy, not triumph. Numbers seal the verdict. 9,000 suicides, 34 ships lost. America produced more ships than were sunk, more planes than were destroyed, more men than were killed. The imbalance was absolute. History records courage, but also futility. In end, kamikazes did not stop America. They revealed truth. Devotion cannot outlast production. Japan gambled lives, America built machines, and the machines endured.